Welcome to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. The key to getting the most out of the seminar series is to listen to the small things, the subtle adjustments our faculty teams adhere to when the fishing might be tough or they're trying to target trophy game fish. That's what we call the gold nuggets of the seminar series. So come with me, let's get right to it, enjoying, in progress, the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series.
Coming to you from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, it's the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Now, here's George Poveromo.
Welcome to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, presented by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. A very distinguished panel that we're going to jump into cutting-edge marine electronics. That is, how do we use our marine electronics to stay on top of and catch fish? Again, distinguished panel here. We have Captain Dave Wicker from the North Carolina area. We have Harry Vernon III out of Miami, and representing South Florida, the Florida Keys, and the Bahamas, Captain Alan Wenzel. When it comes to offshore fishing in general, we live by the lifeblood of the Gulf Stream, and that is where it meanders, it brings that warm current closer to shore over prominent structure, where it pulls out and runs farther offshore. This helps determine where we want to start looking for dolphin or a lot of our offshore species. And the couple ways that you do this, ROFR's Fish and Ocean Forecasting shows you a satellite imagery of where the true edge of the Gulf Stream is at. Any water surface temperature breaks, where you get a degree or two temperature change down here is big. You start going up mid-Atlantic northeast, 3 or 4 or 5 degrees, shows you that there's a body of warm water meeting cooler nearshore slope water. Nutrients abound on these edges. And when you get the nutrients, you get the bait, and in turn, you get the game fish. And Harry, we do a lot of fishing out of South Florida. People will say, well, where do you want to know the true edge of the Gulf Stream? You're all South Florida. You go out 4 miles, you're in blue water. How important is it to locate that true edge?
Well, it's very important, because when you're out there and you're offshore and you come across like say a dead edge where you first go in and you go out there and it's the dark water and it meets the clean water, there's just not a whole lot going on. You don't see nutrients and bait stuff going on there. You're going to just move on out to the next one, because we have several off our coast. So you just keep working and keep going offshore till you see where you start seeing flying fish coming up and seeing other species, birds flying around. And when you see those birds, that's working. You work those areas, because that's where the fish are going to be at.
They now have Sirius XM fish mapping. And this subscriber service, what it does now, like we talked about the water temps, it will show you a number of different features. Sea surface temperature fronts. It'll show you the locations, and the fronts being the strongest temperature gradient. Then they have the sea surface temperature contours, which shows you temperature breaks along specific depth contours. So those are 2 key things that related to trying to find the edge of the stream and major water surface temperature breaks in fronts. Helps you find rips and the such like that.
And then, like when you're saying with your ROFR's charts and all that, they'll show on their charts, they'll see a number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when you're looking at those, that's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. So that if you see a rip that's been there for 2, 3 days, that's probably going to have some good stuff around it.
No doubt about it. And going back to the fish mapping, we had the plankton fronts and the plankton contours. And Dave, the plankton contours helped you in the king mackerel event.
Yes. What we did is, when this particular trip, we found a nice looking front. Okay. Then after we took and looked at the front and saw where it was, then we went and looked at the contours, and where the contours were real tight together, then we said, that's got to be our target spot. And of course, you know, the closer they are, the tighter they are, the more upwelling you're going to have out of it.
Plankton, again, it's the food to a lot of these bait fish. And you go for yellowfin tunas out in the Bahamas or wherever, you find the zones that have the heaviest concentrations, without a doubt, you're going to end up doing well. And Alan, you do a lot of offshore fishing as well as bottom fishing, and locating weed lines is a very big thing too.
Yeah, weed lines, especially with this new service that they have, it always gives us a starting point. So we get there, we know where they're at, we always know what the real current's going to be. It's running 2 or 3 knots or whatever, so you can really kind of quickly do the math. But if you get out there, so many times that I've gone, and it's almost been to the T, where you go right there, all of a sudden you see the birds, you let the lines out, you see a big weed line, It's amazing stuff. This new technology that we're using, it's been a game changer last year.
It is.
And,
Go ahead.
And then one of the things, you can put the weed line into motion for the past 3 days, and that will give you an indication
That's
of
with
which
the
direction.
fish mapping by Sirius.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of which direction that weed line is moving.
Right, because we start looking for those when 3 days where they're at Key West, right? Because we fish in more in Isla Morada area, and we kind of watch them, see how they get bigger and smaller, or the breakup, and then we can kind of watch it. So, oh, wait a minute, this one's going to be really good, right? This is going to be the weed line that we want to go attack.
Right, it helps you predict where it's going to be when you
Yes.
get out. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive even deeper into this, but first we have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back with the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, the panel dealing with using electronics to catch more fish.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by SIMRAD. Go with SIMRAD and go with confidence. Penn, let the battle begin. SiriusXM Marine, weather, fish mapping, and entertainment for anglers. Mercury Outboards, go boldly. Angle, portable fridge freezers, and high-performance coolers. George will be right back. Welcome back to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
Welcome back to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. We're in a good discussion on using marine electronics to locate and catch fish and dealing with the serious fish mapping portion of it. And we talked about using that service to locate a number of different things. We were on the subject of weed lines. And one other feature that they have is the 30-meter subsurface reading that will tell you the water temperature 90 feet beneath the surface. Where this is going to be handy, as I see it in our areas, you get that central Florida pocket when people bottom fish, and that time of year to get the cold water upwellings that sort of just shut the fish down. You could see where these temp breaks or find warmer pockets of water where these fish might be holding. If you're setting live baits down around the thermal change, if you could find one, it's really remarkable what you could actually work and find edges beneath the surface.
Up our way, where it really comes into play is our water gets up 80, 85 degrees, and when it gets that warm, especially our king mackerels, they're looking for cooler water. So that's where this comes into play. You can see where they are, where the water temps are, and that way you can get your bait down to them.
No doubt. Radar, Alan, we talk about weed lines and our type of fishing. Radar, weed lines, birds, they all go hand in hand. How do you dial it in and get the most out of locating birds with a radar?
Well, nowadays, you just hit the button, bird mode. Right. Back in the day, we used to have to sit there and figure, okay, we got to put the gain up, we got to put the contrast down, and we had to do all this stuff. But now, you hit you hit this button called bird mode. It does all that for you. The algorithm, I'm not an engineer by any means, so I just hit the bird mode, and lo and behold, as we're going out, we find our target where we want to go. I mean, we did a little bit of a homework at the dock. Those birds are right there. They're showing up our radar, and now we know when to put the lines out.
You had a very good point where you just said, 2-3 miles out in that SIMRAD bird mode. I'll put my outer limit at 2 miles. So when you notice the birds and you notice that they're staying in one position and they're working, the 2-mile radius is good because that gives you enough time to fire up and race over there. And by the time you get there, it should still be going off and not ending, and you're not going to be late to the party.
It takes time to get all your other gear out, right? So you're not just doing a run and gun. You really want to drag a couple lines when you get over there. So it really takes you about a mile or so to get all your, 2 or 3 lines out.
Especially a guy like Harry Vernon, by the time he starts reeling things up, it could be another day.
Well, it's that senior citizen mode, right?
But listen, not everybody has a bird mode. I've got it the old school SIMRAD where I have to do the gain, and what I'll do is I'll take your gain and white out the whole screen and back it off, and you'll see it'll be blurred out, and then all of a sudden you'll start getting these dots. Now I'm kind of a little more greedier than everybody. I go out to 6 miles, so I'm covering a big area. I'm on a little bit faster boat probably than most people, and I'll be able to get to that spot pretty quick, and I'll figure out which birds that I'm looking for and I'm getting, and I'll run to those areas. But you want to be able to see when you set your gain, and you'll see those little blotches, and all of a sudden it'll be there, and then it goes away. And then you're like, all right, it comes back around, boom, there it is again. Those are birds. And sometimes it disappears for a couple turns, and it comes back. That's a good good spot that you need to go and run to and look at. And when you get closer, it'll be more distinct.
No doubt. Dave, SIMRAD, the electronics, the Evo 3 units, very, very fast. But let's talk about the accuracy in being able to really read the bottom, distinguish between structure, target separation with the game fish, being able to zoom and just get a brilliant picture of what's going on beneath the boat.
Well, with these new transducers they've got and the power that the SIMRAD Evo 3S has now, out of the box it's a 1 kW sounder. But anyway, getting to where the chirp comes into play, you know, you've got multiple signals going down instead of just that one signal going down, bouncing off, coming back up. So you've got multiple. So that's where you come into the target separation.
You could see the bottom contour separation. You could see the bait fish separated from the game fish. It's especially when you zoom it and blow up to get a good view of what's happening at the bottom, how that works out.
It's really, you know, it's come a long ways. And then, of course, to throw in, you know, the structure scan, the active imaging, it's just really becoming amazing.
And one of the big game changers, and we mentioned this in a couple of the other panels earlier, was the SIMRAD CMAP Reveal, which is a high-definition bathymetric chart that shows you every nook and cranny. Again, it's like a Google Earth shot of the bottom. And to give you an example where that came into play, we were fishing a couple numbers that we had off the Marquesas, not doing well at all. And this is when it first came out. I booted this thing up and saw a spot that was about half a mile away. I never knew that type of bottom existed there. So we picked anchor, made drifts. We got on the kings, got on the Spanish, barracudas, the yellowtail. By even knowing it, that was actually there. It's amazing too.
Yep.
Alan, let's talk about the plotter, the trail feature, and how important that is when it comes to fishing.
You get out there and you're going to drift over the wreck. And at that point, instead of having to really know exactly where you're going the next time, because it takes you about maybe 30 minutes to get across, you know if you hit fish during that first drift, oh, well, wait a minute, you're going to mark it along with the track, and then you're going to go right back to that same drift spot and go right over it. But if you didn't hit anything the first time, guess what? You want to move away 50 feet, 30 feet, because you know, if the fish are lazy in general down there, if you're not right over them, you're dangling that bait right over in front of their mouth, they're not going to bite it. They're in the hole or doing whatever. But they're maybe over 30 feet, and you're going to do that next time, and you're going to keep doing the cross until you find the fish.
And it shows you exactly where you've been, which is absolutely great. And also, where we're going right now is to a commercial break. So hold on to those thoughts. We're going to come right back with the electronics session right after these words from our sponsors.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Rapala, your best shot at a world record. Suffix, always use the best line. VMC, your expert in hooks. Williamson Lures, for the pelagic playground. Starbright, blending technology with performance since 1973. George will be right back. Welcome back to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
Welcome back to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. We're in the midst of a good discussion on using electronics to catch fish. But Harry, before we move on, I want to ask you, which you and I had done this a lot, was the side imaging by SIMRAD, which shows you the readings and what's going on off to the sides of the boat. Give us a good example where that helps.
Side scan's awesome. It's for tarpon fishing. If you're doing drifts, finding new stuff in the bay or in whatever areas that you're working, side scan, I'll put it out to 100 feet on both sides, and then I'll also use my plotter, and I'll plot certain areas, and I'll go back and forth. Obviously, I'll have a nice cold one there so I don't lose my track there, but I do a lot of night fishing, but for tarpon fishing and drifting, you'll sit there, you'll put your bait out at 40 feet, 60 feet, 100 feet, and you'll see the tarpon or permit or any other fish that come up, and to me, it's like cheating, and it works. And you'll say, watch that 40-foot line that's going to get hit, and sure enough, it gets hit. And you could bring your baits in closer or let them out further if you see fish going by. I've gone and moved to certain areas and say, all right, the fish aren't here, and I will sit there and watch the side scan. Also, oh, there they are, they're over here. And I'll set up a drift where they're going to come right into my pattern and just crush it. Side scan.
A lot of merits
awesome.
of the structure scan on that. All right, Alan, let's talk about...
And the weed lines. Don't forget about the side scan and the weed line, the offshore. It's not just about bait fishing and wreck fishing.
Under the weed line.
We look under the weeds quite a bit. I know, but we've talked about this many times. I used to send my son underneath the weed lines on this with a mask and snorkel to see if there's any big fish under there. But now, now we've got all this new technology where I don't have to do that anymore. His mom thanks me a lot.
Well, speaking of the technology, how things have changed with the entertainment aspects of boats, okay? You're with JL Audio, and you're the one who educated me on this a number of years ago, that it's a science to put in a solid sound system in a boat, and it's the balance. I remember when we were doing mine, that not only would you have speakers in the front, the sides, and the back, but there had to be a balance where the front was just as loud as the back. Something about the continuity. Explain the balance and what's going on with modern marine electronics in terms of stereo systems.
Well, sure. Well, one of the things that when I ever get on a boat, we try to set it up as a system. We always identify where your listening area is, right? You want to make sure that if you have people in the bow area or the stern, the cockpit, the helm, whatever it is, you want to make sure that they have their own listening area. So when you're walking around a boat, it's like you go to a restaurant, right? You hear the background music or whatever. You don't hear it loud at one table versus the other table. So it's really the same thing. So we look at, your zone 1, maybe the bow, the helm. We always try to make the helm a little bit more of a sweet spot, so to speak, because that's where either the owner or the captain's, he's the one that's doling out all the cash. So we try to make him a little special. But that's really what it is. And with technology today, with head units that have zone control, in your car you have left and right balance, but in your boat, you really need to say, well, the people up the front, they want to just talk. So you shut that zone off and you let the guys in the back, having a few cold ones or whatever it is and enjoying the night. But other times when you're cruising, you want to be able to make sure they all do it.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. Stay cool and protected while fishing. Calcutta Outdoors. Hard-working outdoor gear. JL Audio. Ahead of the curve. ACR. Building survival products since 1956. Florida Keys and Key West. Visit flakeys.com. George will be right back. Welcome back to the final installment of the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
But the cool thing now is what we have, it's all digital sound processing. Some of the newest, latest technology, which your next boat will have this, that we get out there and we just push a button. So we have cruise mode, sandbar mode, party mode, dock mode. So it's like we'll set it up as a lot of modes. So it's like you're cruising when you're driving at 60, or my boat does that. Yours may not.
20.
Well, it's got all that growth on the bottom, so it doesn't go very fast.
Yeah.
But in reality, we want to make sure, because you got all the wind noise, the ambient noise, the engine noise. One, you got to have a subwoofer to cover that stuff up. But in the end, one thing you want to do when you get to the sandbar, which we all love down here in South Florida, is you want to impress the people out of the boat. See, when we're first setting it up, we want to make sure everybody in the boat hears it. But now all of a sudden everybody wants to get out of the boat. So now we can just EQ it, with an equalizer, a computer, and we hit the button, and all of a sudden now all the music jumps out of the boat and into the water.
And you're the guy everybody throws sinkers at.
Exactly. No, they're the ones that want to come over and hang out.
Well, again, real quickly too, the saltwater is a brutal environment.
Oh, yes.
JL has been known with their speakers to really weather all of that.
Yes. Well, it's the engineering and the technology that we do. Our engineers do a great job finding the materials. All of our materials go into the salt chamber, the UV chambers. And one thing about our product is that we always do it individually parts. Some companies will just put the whole speaker in this chamber and everything kind of hidden. Ours, we put the voice coil in, we put the cone in, and we want it to last 1,000, 2,000 hours in the chamber before we even bring it out.
And probably the most important piece of electronics is what might save your life. And ACR, the EPIRB, Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon, every boat should have this. When you go out and, God forbid, you're in a distressful situation, you could turn this on. They'll send you coordinates to the satellite. They'll send those coordinates back to the local rescue forces, it's a lifesaver. But also, which is pretty unique from ACR, is a new safety item. It's called the rescue flare. Okay, it's a battery operated, shoots out the SOS distress signals, and you could see this from around a 6-mile radius. Now, provided you have the distress flag, this can take the place of flares within the United States. So rather than going through expired flares and all that, if you have the rescue flare and you have the distress flag by ACR, you're actually legal at that point. So 2 more safety items that you want to make sure you have in your boat, and you're happy as heck that you don't have to use it. And I appreciate Alan Wenzel, Harry running the third, and Dave Wicker on that session. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope you like that electronics panel, and we will be back with more Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. Well, there you have it, this week's Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. Now, adhering to Saltwater Sportsman Seminar Series tradition, you still have chances to win door prize drawings. Simply go to nationalseminarseries.com, log on to the door prize page, just give us your name, phone number, and an email address, and at the conclusion of the airing of the series in December, we will draw for a number of excellent door prizes. Get right to it. We'll see you on the next episode of the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series.